That night, I sat alone at the kitchen table while Weston went through the bills. He could see how shaken I was, but he did not pressure me to talk. "I need to understand why she is doing this," I finally said. Weston nodded. "Then don't ask her what she wants you to believe. Find out what she is hiding." His words stayed with me. The next morning, I called the wedding venue. I expected them to tell me that my reservation was gone. Instead, the manager said something that made my stomach tighten. "Your mother called us yesterday," she said. "She told us you were canceling the wedding because of financial problems." I never said that. "I know. That's why we didn't cancel it." I thanked her and ended the call. My mother had lied to the venue. I opened the folder where I kept all my wedding papers. My mother's promise to contribute $18,000 was written in an email. She had clearly agreed to help with the wedding costs months earlier. But there was something else. The last payment she had made was nearly 3 months ago. I checked my bank records and found another strange detail. A large payment had been made from my mother's account to a luxury event company. The amount was almost $14,000. I knew exactly what that company was. Briar had been talking about using them for a future wedding. I stared at the screen for several minutes. My mother had told me she could no longer afford my wedding, but money was clearly being spent somewhere else. I called Briar. She answered quickly. "What happened?" she asked. "Did Mom give you money for your wedding?" There was silence. Then she said, "Why are you asking me that?" "Because I found a payment." Briar became nervous. She told me Mom had helped her with a few things, but she claimed she didn't know where the money came from. I wanted to believe her. Then she said something that changed everything. "Emery, Mom told me not to talk to you about the wedding." My chest tightened. "Why?" "I don't know. She said you would make everything difficult." I ended the call and sat there thinking about every strange thing that had happened during the past few months. My mother had become angry whenever I asked about the wedding budget. She had refused to show me certain financial records. She had also insisted that I delay some payments because she said she was handling them. Now I understood why. She had not simply changed her mind about helping me. She had been moving money somewhere else. And if that was true, I needed to know exactly where it had gone. I opened my laptop and began searching through every old email, receipt, and document I'd saved. After almost an hour, I found something I had completely forgotten about. A scanned document from my grandfather. My hand started shaking. I had no idea why my mother had never told me about it. I stared at the scanned document from my grandfather for several minutes, but I knew I needed to deal with one problem at a time. The wedding was still hanging by a thread, and I could not let my mother's lies distract me from what was happening right in front of me. I closed the laptop and drove to my mother's house. Lenora was sitting in the living room when I arrived. She looked at me without surprise, as if she had been expecting me. "I know about Briar's wedding expenses," I said. Her face changed for only a second. Then she sighed. "You went through my private finances?" "I found payments connected to Briar's wedding." "She's getting married too," Mom replied. "What's wrong with helping her?" "Nothing. But you promised to help me first." She looked away. I waited for an explanation, but instead she said, "Emery, you need to understand something. Briar has a better future ahead of her." I felt like I had been slapped. "What does that mean?" "It means she needs more support than you do." I could barely speak. I had worked for everything I had. I had never asked my parents to pay my bills or support me. When I needed help, I usually figured things out myself. But apparently, that was exactly why my mother believed I deserved less. "You promised me $18,000, I said quietly. "Then you took money away from my wedding and gave it to Briar." "I didn't take anything from you." "You did." Mom became angry. "You're making this much bigger than it is. Briar's wedding is going to be important for the family. And mine isn't." She didn't answer. That silence hurt more than anything she could have said. I left her house without arguing. When I told Weston what happened, he didn't blame my mother or demand that I fight with her. He simply took my hand. "We can make the wedding smaller," he said. "We don't need $18,000 to get married." I looked at him. "You're not angry?" "I'm angry because they hurt you. But I'm not going to let them decide what our marriage means." His words gave me strength. We began looking at smaller venues and cutting unnecessary expenses. For the first time, the wedding felt like something that belonged to us. Then the call started. My aunt asked if I was really planning to cut my parents out of the wedding. A cousin told me Mom said Weston had convinced me to turn against my family. Another relative said I was being selfish. I realized my mother had already created a new story. She wasn't talking about the money anymore. She was telling everyone that Weston was controlling me. I called Mom one last time. Why are you telling people that Weston is forcing me to do this? She answered calmly, because that's what everyone will believe. I went silent. That was when I finally understood. My mother didn't just want to control my wedding. She wanted to control the story everyone told about me. The next morning, I returned to the folder I had found in my house. I could not stop thinking about the document from my grandfather, but before I could understand that, I needed to know what my mother had been doing with my money. I spread the papers across the kitchen table. Some were old bank statements. Others were letters and account records. Most of them meant nothing to me at first. Then I found an account with my name on it. I froze. I remembered that account. When I was a teenager, my grandparents had told me they were putting money aside for my future. My grandfather had said it would help me buy a home or continue my education when I became an adult. My mother had always told me the money was gone. She said medical bills, family expenses, and other problems had taken everything. But the statement showed something completely different. There had been a large balance in the account for years. Then, several transfers appeared. One of them had gone to an account controlled by Briar. I checked the dates. The transfers happened shortly after Briar announced her engagement. My hands became cold. I finally understood why my mother had been so desperate to stop my wedding. She had already decided where my money belonged. I took pictures of every document and placed the originals back in the folder. Then I drove to my mother's house. She opened the door and immediately looked worried when she saw the papers in my hand. "You need to stop this," she said. "I need you to explain this." I showed her the bank statement. She looked at it and slowly sat down. "Yes," she admitted. "You took my money. I borrowed it. You gave it to Briar. She needed help. So did I." Mom looked at me with the same cold expression I had seen so many times growing up. "Briar has a family to build. You have Weston." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Then I remembered the document from my grandfather. I pulled it from my bag. "There is something else." Her face went pale. The document showed that my grandfather had intended to leave a property to me. I had never known about it. Mom tried to take the paper from my hand, but I pulled it away. "Why didn't you tell me?" She said nothing. I asked again. Still nothing. Then I noticed another document showing that the property records had been changed years earlier. My name had been removed. My mother's name was there instead. At that moment, something inside me changed. I had spent years believing my mother was simply unfair. Now I understood that she had been controlling my future. She had taken my money, hidden my inheritance, and expected me to stay quiet. I looked at her calmly. "You should have left me with nothing." She stared at me. I folded the papers and placed them back into my bag. "Now I'm going to find out exactly what you took." For the first time in my life, I stopped waiting for my mother to change. Weston and I sat at our kitchen table with a notebook between us. We wrote down everything we could still afford and removed anything that wasn't necessary. The new wedding would be smaller. It would not have expensive decorations or a huge guest list. We didn't care anymore. We just wanted to stand together and get married. We found a quiet venue outside town. The owner was kind and offered us a reasonable price. We paid the first amount ourselves and felt relieved. Then, 3 days later, the owner called me. "I need to ask you something," she said. "Your mother contacted me." My heart dropped. "What did she say?" "She told me you were having emotional problems and that your fiancé wasn't financially responsible." I closed my eyes. I knew exactly what my mother was doing. She wanted everyone to think I couldn't make decisions for myself. I asked the owner if she still wanted to work with us. She said yes, but she wanted the remaining payment earlier than planned. I agreed. Then another problem appeared. A photographer we had booked suddenly canceled. When I asked why, he told me someone had warned him that Weston might not pay. That was enough. My mother was contacting every vendor she could reach. I didn't call her. I didn't yell. Instead, I created a folder on my computer. I saved every email, every receipt, every contract, every message, every statement from vendors. I even wrote down the dates and times people told me what my mother had said. If she wanted to create a story about me, I was going to create a record of the truth. Meanwhile, Briar came to my house one evening. She looked uncomfortable. "Emery, can we talk?" I let her inside. She placed a document on my table. This came from Mom. I recognized the bank information immediately. Briar looked at me. Is this really your money? I didn't answer. She continued staring at the numbers. Mom told me she was using her savings to help me. She lied to you. Briar's eyes filled with tears. I didn't know. I believe you. She covered her face with her hands. For a long time, neither of us spoke. Then Briar whispered, "How much did she take?" "I don't know yet." She looked terrified. "I think there is more." "What do you mean?" "Mom has an old family safe. Grandpa used to keep important papers there. She never let anyone touch it. I remembered seeing that safe when I was younger. It had always been locked. Briar told me where it was. I didn't know what we would find inside. But that night, I realized my mother's secrets were much bigger than the money. The next morning, I went to look for that safe. And for the first time, I wondered if my grandfather had left something behind that could finally reveal everything. The safe was hidden behind an old wooden cabinet in my grandfather's study. Briar showed me where it was, and I stood there for a moment without touching it. I remember that room from my childhood. My grandfather had spent hours there, usually with his glasses low on his nose and papers spread across his desk. I also remembered his final words to me. "When you're old enough to understand what your mother has done, you'll know where to look." At the time, I thought he was talking about something else. Now I wasn't so sure. Weston came with me, along with an attorney who had agreed to help us understand the documents. We opened the safe carefully. Inside were several envelopes, old bank statements, property records, and letters. My hand started shaking when I saw my grandfather's handwriting. I opened the first envelope. It contained a letter dated years before his death. He had written that a valuable family property was meant to become mine when I turned 30. I read the sentence twice. Then I looked at the property records. The property was still producing income. Rent had been collected from it every month. But none of that money had ever reached me. My mother's name appeared on several of the records. I felt sick. She had been collecting the rent while telling me I had nothing left for my grandfather. Weston looked at me. "Emery, this isn't just about the wedding." I knew he was right. The wedding had simply exposed everything. My mother knew that once Weston and I married, I would have my own household and my own decisions. She knew I would become harder to control. She had tried to stop the wedding because she was afraid I would start asking questions. And I finally understood why she had spent years making me doubt myself. If I believed I was dependent on her, I would never look closely at what she had taken. I continued searching through the safe. There were more bank records. Some showed transfers. Others showed payments connected to the property. There were also letters between my mother and people who had handled the property. Every document made the truth clearer. Weston placed his hand on my shoulder. "You have enough evidence now." I nodded, but I didn't want to rush home and confront my mother. She had always been good at changing the story. She could cry, deny everything, and convince people I was being cruel. This time, I wanted the truth to speak for itself. I asked the attorney what my options were. He told me that the documents needed to be handled carefully and that I should not give my mother time to destroy anything else. I gathered copies of everything. Then I made one decision. I would not confront Lenora alone. I would tell the truth in front of the entire family. There would be no shouting, no revenge speech, just evidence. For years, my mother had controlled every version of the story. At the next family meeting, she would finally have to listen to mine. The family meeting took place on a Saturday afternoon at my Aunt Marlowe's house. When I arrived, almost everyone was already there. My mother sat at the center of the room. Briar was sitting quietly beside her, looking nervous. Weston stayed beside me, but I knew this was something I needed to handle myself. Mom looked at everyone and sighed. "I never wanted things to reach this point," she said. "But Emery has changed." I said nothing. She continued talking about how ungrateful I had become. She said I had embarrassed the family by refusing to listen to her about the wedding. Then she turned toward Weston. "He has filled her head with lies," she said. "He wants her to turn against us." A few relatives looked at Weston. One of my uncles asked him why he was causing problems between me and my mother. Weston didn't answer. He looked at me. He knew I wanted to speak when I was ready. Mom continued. "I canceled the wedding because I was trying to protect my daughter." I almost laughed. Protect me? After everything I had discovered. I waited until she finished. Then I placed my folder on the table. Nobody spoke. I opened it slowly and removed the first document. This is the account my grandparents created for my future. I placed the bank statements in front of everyone. This is where the money went. Briar looked down. Her face changed when she saw the records. I continued. These are the property documents. Then I placed my grandfather's letter on top. This explains who the property was supposed to belong to. My mother's expression changed. For the first time, she looked afraid. I explained everything without raising my voice. The money promised for my wedding was never the real issue. My mother had taken money that belonged to me. She had hidden my inheritance. She had collected income from my grandfather's property without telling me. Then she tried to stop my wedding because she feared I would become independent enough to discover the truth. Briar started crying. I didn't know, she whispered. Mom immediately turned toward her. Briar, this isn't your fault. Briar shook her head. You told me that money was yours. Mom became defensive. I was doing what was best for this family. I looked directly at her. If you were protecting the family, why did you have to hide everything from me? The room became completely silent. My mother opened her mouth. Nothing came out. Then I told everyone that I had already hired an attorney. I wasn't asking Mom for an apology. I wasn't asking her to admit she had been wrong. I was demanding accountability. For years, she had been able to silence me with guilt, anger, and fear. That day, none of it worked. She looked at me differently. Not like her difficult daughter. Not like someone she could control. She looked at me like someone she could finally lose. After the family meeting, I thought the hardest part was finally over. I was wrong. A few days later, Aunt Marlowe asked me to meet her alone. When I arrived, she looked exhausted. I need to tell you something, she said. I sat across from her. She took a deep breath. I knew about the property. How long? Years. For a moment, I couldn't understand what she was saying. She explained that my grandfather had told several family members about his plans before he died. They knew the property was supposed to become mine when I turned 30. They also knew my mother had taken control of it. You knew I was struggling? I asked. Marlowe lowered her eyes. Yes. You knew I was trying to save money for a home? Yes. And you knew I had an inheritance? She nodded. I felt something inside me break. I had spent years blaming only my mother. Now I realized other people had watched everything happen. Marlowe said Lenora had pressured her to stay quiet. She told me you would destroy the family if you found out, she said. I shook my head. No, she destroyed the family by lying. Marlowe began crying. I was afraid of her. I understood fear, but I couldn't accept what their silence had cost me. I remembered every time I had worried about rent, every time I had worked extra hours, every time I had wondered why I couldn't get ahead while my mother kept telling me that life was simply difficult. All those years, they knew. They watched me struggle while the property that belonged to me continued making money. When I returned home, Weston knew something was wrong. I told him everything. He listened without interrupting. Then he said, "Don't let them turn you into someone you don't want to be." I looked at him. I want them to regret what they did. They probably will, he said. But your biggest revenge doesn't have to be hurting them. He took my hand. Build the life they tried to stop you from having. Those words stayed with me. I contacted the attorney again. We began taking the proper legal steps to recover what belonged to me. I gave them every document I had collected. This time, I wasn't afraid. My mother could no longer scare me into silence. My relatives could no longer make me feel guilty for protecting myself. And I made one more decision. The wedding was still happening. Weston and I went back to our plans. The guest list became even smaller. There would be no pressure to impress anyone. No expensive family celebration. No pretending everything was perfect. We would simply stand together and promise each other a future. For the first time, I understood what the wedding really meant. It wasn't about getting my family's approval. It was about choosing the person who had chosen me when everyone else walked away. And that was enough. On the morning of my wedding, I woke up earlier than I expected. For a few seconds, I forgot everything that had happened. Then I saw my wedding dress hanging near the window. I smiled. This day was finally here. Weston and I had planned everything ourselves. It wasn't perfect, but it felt real. While I was getting ready, my phone vibrated. It was a message from Mom. I opened it. She said she would not come to my wedding unless I apologized for humiliating the family. I read it twice. For a moment, the old feeling returned. The feeling that I had to fix everything, that I had to make my mother happy, that I had to apologize even when I had done nothing wrong. Then I looked at my dress again. I locked my phone and put it away. I didn't respond. A few hours later, I arrived at the ceremony. Weston was standing at the front. He looked nervous, but when he saw me, his face changed. He smiled. That smile made every painful moment worth surviving. The ceremony was small. There were no huge decorations, no expensive gifts, no family member telling me what to do. The people sitting there were people who had chosen to support us. As I walked toward Weston, I felt lighter than I'd felt in years. I realized my mother had spent most of my life teaching me that family approval was the key to happiness. But standing there, I finally understood that it wasn't. I didn't need her permission to be happy. I didn't need her money to be worthy. And I didn't need her presence to make my wedding real. When Weston took my hands, I felt completely calm. We exchanged our vows. For the first time, I wasn't thinking about what my family thought. I was thinking about the life we were about to build. After the ceremony, we had a simple dinner with our closest people. My phone rang while we were eating. It was my attorney. I stepped outside to answer. His voice sounded serious. We found additional financial records. My heart started beating faster. What did they show? He explained that the records connected my mother directly to several transfers involving my inheritance. There were also documents showing that she had known exactly where the money came from. She hadn't made a mistake. She had known. She had made the decisions deliberately. I stood outside the restaurant, holding the phone tightly. A strange calm came over me. I had once imagined revenge as making my mother feel the same pain she had caused me. But now I understood something better. I didn't need to destroy her. I needed to take back what she believed she could control. My future, my money, my choices, my life. I walked back inside and looked at Weston. For the first time, I knew exactly where my revenge would begin. The legal process took several months, but for the first time, I was willing to wait. I had spent years waiting for my mother to tell me the truth. Now I was waiting for the truth to speak for itself. When the final decision came, my attorney called me. "The property is legally recognized as yours," he said. I closed my eyes. For years, I had believed I had nothing. Now I finally had proof that my grandfather had kept his promise. The money that had been taken from my accounts also had to be repaid. It wasn't about becoming rich. It was about getting back something that had been taken from me without my permission. Briar was affected too. She postponed her wedding after learning how much of her future had been connected to my stolen inheritance. She called me one evening. "I don't know what to say," she whispered. "You don't have to say anything. I should have asked more questions." "I know." She started crying. "I never wanted this." "I believe you." Our relationship wasn't suddenly perfect, but for the first time, Briar was taking responsibility for her part instead of defending Mom. Lenora was different. She was furious. She called me and said I had destroyed the family. "You took everything from us," she said. I stood quietly for a moment. Then I finally said the words I'd carried inside me for years. "I didn't destroy this family. I stopped protecting the person who was destroying me." She became silent. I ended the call. After that, some relatives apologized. Others refused. A few still believed my mother had been right. I used to think I needed everyone to understand my side. I didn't anymore. People were allowed to believe whatever they wanted. I knew the truth. That was enough. A few months later, Weston and I used part of my recovered inheritance to buy a modest home. It wasn't huge. It didn't have expensive furniture or a perfect backyard. But every corner belonged to us. The first night we slept there, I looked around the quiet room and remembered my mother's words. "We won't spend a dime on this circus." I smiled. She had thought my wedding would be the beginning of my downfall. Instead, it became the beginning of my freedom. The life she had tried to control was finally mine. I had my home. I had my marriage. I had my future. And most importantly, I had stopped believing that I needed my mother's approval. But there was still one thing I couldn't completely answer. Could I forgive her? I didn't know. Part of me wanted to forget everything and move forward. Another part remembered every lie, every secret, and every year I spent believing I wasn't worth as much as Briar. Weston never pressured me. He simply told me that forgiveness was my choice. So I decided I wouldn't make that choice because anyone expected it from me. If I ever forgave Lenora, it would be because I was finally ready, not because she deserved to escape the consequences, and not because I needed her back. For the first time, my life belonged completely to me. Nearly 3 years passed, and sometimes I still found it hard to believe how different my life had become. Weston and I were still married. Our home was quiet, comfortable, and completely ours. It wasn't the kind of house my mother would have chosen for me, but that didn't matter anymore. It was our home. Our marriage had survived everything that was supposed to tear us apart. There were difficult days, but Weston never used my past against me. He never asked me to choose between him and my family. He simply stood beside me and let me make my own decisions. That was something I had never experienced before. One afternoon, I received a letter from Lenora. I almost threw it away. Instead, I opened it. She admitted that jealousy had affected the way she treated me. She admitted she had favored Briar and made choices based on what she thought Briar deserved. She also admitted that she had been afraid of losing control over me. Then she apologized. She said she regretted destroying our relationship. I read the letter twice. I expected anger. Instead, I felt tired. There was a time when I would have done anything to hear my mother admit she was wrong. But when the words finally came, I realized I no longer needed them. I placed the letter in a drawer. I didn't answer. That didn't mean I hated her. It simply meant I wasn't ready to open that door again. Briar was different. She slowly rebuilt our relationship. She stopped asking for money. She stopped making excuses for Mom. She started calling just to talk. One evening, she came to my house and apologized. I know saying sorry doesn't fix everything, she said. I know, but I want to earn your trust again. I hugged her. It wasn't the same relationship we had when we were children, but maybe it didn't have to be. We could build something new. In my home, I kept my grandfather's handwritten letter in a safe place. I also framed one sentence from it and placed it on the wall. Never allow someone else's fear to become the prison you live inside. Every morning, I saw those words. They reminded me of how far I had come. Sometimes I thought about the day my mother looked at me and said she wouldn't spend a dime on my wedding. At the time, those words made me feel powerless. Now, they meant something completely different. She thought taking away her support would make me come crawling back. Instead, it forced me to discover that I could build a life without her permission. I didn't destroy my mother. I didn't try to embarrass her. I didn't spend my life waiting for her to suffer. I simply walked away from the control she had held over me for so long. That was my revenge. Not watching her lose. Not making her afraid. Just waking up every morning beside the man I loved, inside the home we built together, knowing that my life finally belonged to me. And for the first time, that was more than enough.